Here are top 5 most horrific deaths ever recorded in history. Number 5. The case of Junko Furuta, 1988, Japan. Junko Furuta was an ordinary 17-year-old high school student from Misato, Japan. She had dreams, friends, and a simple teenage life. But in November 1988, everything changed. On her way home from work, she was kidnapped by a group of teenage boys, classmates who had nothing but evil intentions hidden behind their innocent faces. For 44 days, Junko was held captive inside a suburban house in Ardaki, Tokyo. The house looked perfectly normal from the outside, with a small yard, quiet neighbors, and a calm street where people passed by without suspicion. But inside those walls, a nightmare was unfolding, one that would later be remembered as one of the most brutal crimes in Japanese history. At first, the boys pretended she was their friend. They introduced her to their families as someone they were helping. Even the parents who lived there didn't realize what was truly happening behind closed doors. But as the days passed, Junko's suffering grew beyond imagination. She was beaten daily, burned with cigarettes, and forced to endure constant humiliation. Her captors treated her pain like entertainment, recording her agony as if it was some twisted form of fun. They took everything from her: her dignity, her hope, her body, and finally, her life. Despite the endless pain, she never stopped fighting to survive. She begged for food, pleaded for mercy, and still believed someone might come to save her. But no one did. The world went on, unaware that a young girl was living through hell inside a quiet Tokyo home. By the 44th day, Junko's body could no longer take the torture. Her captors stuffed her lifeless body into an oil drum, poured concrete over her, and left it in a warehouse. Days later, her remains were discovered. What shocked the nation even more was the fact that her killers, being minors, received extremely light sentences. They lived on. She didn't. The case of Junko Furuta stands as a haunting reminder of the cruelty that can exist behind human faces. There was no monster here, no ghost, no spirit, just people. People capable of something far worse than supernatural horror. Today, locals say the house where Junko was tortured still stands. Some say they hear faint cries at night, or the sound of something tapping against the walls. Others believe it's not a ghost, just guilt, echoing through the years. Junko Furuta's story is not just about death. It's about the silence that allows evil to live unchecked. It's about the darkness that can grow in ordinary places. And it's a reminder that sometimes the worst horrors ever recorded are the ones created by us. Number 4. The elevator decapitation, Suzanne Hart. 2011, New York City. Suzanne Hart was a 41-year-old advertising executive working in a Manhattan office building on East 56th Street. She was known for her professionalism, her energy, and her warm personality. On the morning of December 14th, 2011, Suzanne arrived at work just as she always did, coffee in hand, focused, and ready for another busy day. What she didn't know was that within seconds of stepping into the building's elevator, her life would end in one of the most horrifying ways imaginable. It was 9 a.m. The lobby was quiet, filled only with the faint sound of footsteps and the hum of the elevators moving between floors. Suzanne walked toward one of the elevators with 2 coworkers behind her. She pressed the button. The doors slid open. Without hesitation, she stepped inside. But before her coworkers could follow, something went terribly wrong. The elevator suddenly lurched upward, the doors still wide open. It rose violently between floors, trapping Suzanne between the elevator car and the lobby wall. Everything happened in a split second. Her coworkers could only stand frozen in shock, unable to process what they were witnessing. By the time emergency services arrived, there was nothing left to save. The investigation revealed a chilling truth. A maintenance worker had been performing repairs on the elevator just moments before the accident, and crucial safety mechanisms had been disabled. A small oversight, a single mistake, had turned an ordinary morning commute into a scene of unimaginable horror. What made this death even more disturbing was how ordinary it all was. An everyday machine, something millions use daily without a second thought, suddenly turning into an unstoppable force. There was no warning, no chance to react, just a single mechanical failure that ended a life in seconds. Co-workers and rescue teams were left haunted. The company closed off the elevator permanently, covering it with a steel panel. Some say the building still feels strange. The other elevators occasionally stop for no reason. On the same floor where Suzanne died, engineers blame old wiring, but employees whisper about something else. They say if you're alone late at night and the elevator stops between floors, you might hear faint footsteps or the sound of doors sliding open when no one is there. Whether it's real or not, no one stays behind to find out. Suzanne Hart's death is a tragic reminder that horror doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it happens in broad daylight, in the safest of places, with no villain and no escape. Just a moment where everything fails and life ends in silence. Number 3. The Scaphism Death, Ancient Persia. In the chronicles of human cruelty, few deaths compare to what the ancient Persians called Scaphism, the most gruesome execution method ever recorded in history. It was designed not only to kill a person but to erase their humanity long before their final breath. Scaphism, also known as the boats, was reserved for traitors and enemies of the empire. The condemned was stripped naked and trapped between two hollowed wooden boats, one half covering the front, the other the back, leaving only the head, arms, and legs exposed. Their fate was slow, deliberate, and unspeakably cruel. The executioners would begin by feeding the victim a mixture of milk and honey, until they could no longer swallow. The excess caused violent vomiting, but that was only the beginning. The same mixture was then smeared over the victim's face and limbs, a sweet invitation to thousands of insects. Under the scorching Persian sun, flies, beetles, and worms began to gather. The smell of decay mixed with sugar. As hours turned into days, insects burrowed into the victim's flesh, laying eggs inside open sores. The person was left to rot alive, unable to move, unable to scream for long, surrounded by still air and the sound of their own slow death. Ancient historians wrote that the longest a person survived this punishment was 17 days. 17 days of slow decay, under the sky, surrounded by silence and swarms. It wasn't just execution, it was humiliation crafted into a ritual, a warning to anyone who dared defy the empire. Scaphism became a symbol of power, a message that the king's will was eternal and rebellion meant a fate worse than death. Centuries later, scholars debated whether every detail was true or exaggerated. But even if half of it was real, it remains one of the most disturbing chapters in human history. No spirit or curse could match the horror of Scaphism. It was humans who invented it. It was humans who carried it out. And it is humans who continue to remember it, thousands of years later, as proof that sometimes the greatest monsters are the ones who wear crowns. Number 2. The Radiator Girl, Gloria Ramirez, 1994, California. On the night of February 19, 1994, the emergency room at Riverside General Hospital in California was quiet. Nurses chatted softly. Machines beeped steadily. It was a normal Saturday evening until Gloria Ramirez arrived. Gloria was 31 years old, a mother of 2, and suffering LL late-stage cervical cancer. She was weak, barely conscious, her breathing shallow. Her family had called for help after she began struggling to breathe. The paramedics rushed her into the ER. Doctors immediately began standard procedures, oxygen, 4 fluids, heart monitoring. But within minutes, something strange began to happen. The staff noticed a faint, oily sheen on Gloria's skin, a strange, glossy texture that reflected the fluorescent lights. Then came a sharp, chemical odor, thick and sweet, like ammonia mixed with something metallic. When a nurse drew blood from her arm, the smell intensified. It was so strong that several staff members began to feel dizzy. One nurse collapsed. Another complained of burning sensations in her face. The ER quickly descended into chaos. Doctors and nurses fell one by one, gasping for air, vomiting, and shaking uncontrollably. The medical team evacuated the room, leaving only a skeleton crew behind in protective gear. But by then, Gloria's heart had stopped. Despite all efforts, she was pronounced dead at 8:50 p.m. What followed was one of the strangest medical investigations in history. The entire emergency department was sealed off and decontaminated. 5 staff members were hospitalized. The media dubbed her the Toxic Lady. No one could explain how an ordinary patient had released toxic fumes that incapacitated an entire medical team. For weeks, scientists debated. Some claimed Gloria had been using a home remedy involving dimethyl sulfoxide, a solvent that could react chemically with oxygen to form dimethyl sulfate, a poisonous gas. Others said it was a case of mass hysteria, triggered by panic and stress. But even with all the theories, no one could prove exactly what happened. Gloria Ramirez's body was sealed in multiple layers of plastic and kept for autopsy. The medical examiner reported unusual chemical residues in her tissues, but no definitive cause. To this day, the mystery remains unresolved. Some of the hospital staff refused to work the night shift again. They said the smell never really went away, that sometimes, when the air conditioning hums, a faint metallic odor still drifts through the halls. Scientists look for logic, but horror doesn't always obey logic. Gloria Ramirez didn't die in a haunted house or from a curse. She died surrounded by doctors, in a place meant to save lives. Her death reminds us that horror can appear anywhere, even in the most sterile, well-lit rooms. If you're still with us, here till now, kindly hit the subscription button and like this video. Number 1. The death of David Grunman, 1982, Arizona. In the vast deserts of Arizona, the landscape stretches endlessly, dry air, red sand, and towering saguaros standing like ancient sentinels. For locals, these cacti are symbols of endurance. Some are more than 200 years old, surviving storms, droughts, and time itself. But for one man, a simple act of carelessness against one of these giants turned into one of the strangest and most horrifying deaths ever recorded. His name was David Grunman. He was 27 years old and lived in Phoenix. On February 4th, 1982, he and a friend drove out into the desert near Lake Pleasant to shoot at cacti for fun. The day was clear, the sun high. With a shotgun in hand, David began firing at a massive saguaro cactus, nearly 26 feet tall and weighing more than a ton. Each shot ripped chunks from its thick, green surface, echoing through the desert air. After several blasts, the cactus began to crack. David laughed and fired again. But what he didn't know was that these towering plants, with roots deep and arms heavy with water, can become deadly when disturbed. The final shot hit a main section near the base, and in an instant, one of the cactus's heavy arms broke loose. It fell directly toward him. In seconds, the arm, weighing hundreds of pounds, crushed David to the ground, impaling him through the chest. He died instantly. The desert went silent again. When authorities arrived, the scene looked almost surreal. A man pinned beneath the very plant he'd been shooting, his weapon lying beside him, the cactus towering overhead like an executioner frozen in time. The story quickly spread across Arizona, a dark, ironic tale that some locals called nature's revenge. Others saw it as a strange accident, a reminder that the desert doesn't forgive disrespect. Over time, David's death became a legend told around campfires and roadside bars. Some say at dusk, near the spot where it happened, the desert wind carries a faint echo, the sound of laughter cut short by silence. Whether true or not, no one stays long enough to find out. Saguaro cacti are now protected under Arizona law, their destruction punishable by heavy fines. But no punishment could ever match what happened to David Grunman. He went into the desert with a weapon and came face to face with something older, stronger, and far more patient than himself. In the end, it wasn't a monster or a curse that killed him, it was nature itself, reclaiming the respect it was owed.